Hey guys, this is Lala Legacy and welcome back to another episode of SeaBed. So, let's jump right back in. Do you know a lake that should be here, or be somewhere around here? It's that way. Kozue pointed at the woods. Looking in the direction she pointed, I couldn't see anything other than the trees. There's a road further down, I'll show you. I followed the path that Kozue showed me. After only a few dozen meters, I could make out a body of water through the tree branches. The lake stretched much wider than I had thought, its surface still as a mirror. I sat down on a half-withered tree I found lying on the small sandy beach. It turned out to be sturdier than it looked. It didn't seem like I had to worry about crashing down under my weight, or it crashing down under my weight. I shifted my gaze back to the lake, observing the black humus-covered slope come in contact with the water, as well as another fallen tree with its roots sticking out next to it. It didn't seem like the lake had received any artificial treatment. The area I'd been sitting at was the closest I could get to the water without the risk of falling in. The water was so clear I could see the sand at the lake's bottom. At some areas, it seemed like the surrounding vegetation had also invaded the lake itself, covering parts of its bottom in green. Watching the lake reminded me of that one time Takako invited me to go fishing. We were still in middle school. Takako, me, and two of her good friends at the time left our houses on our bicycles. Our destination was the lake that Takako's family used to visit by car all the time. She was the only one who knew the location. Takako said it only took 20 minutes by car, but being two mountains and one river away, the place wasn't exactly easy to reach for a bunch of children. In truth, Takako's two friends gave up after seeing the slope leading over the first mountain. I would have left myself, but I knew Takako would not give up and try to press on, with or without us. It would have been bad if she got lost, so I followed her while making sure to remember the way. Memorizing the unusual roofs of the houses around the mountains, I was thinking that I'd have Takako turn back around noon, even if by force. However, by noon, we had already reached the lake. Takako was overjoyed by having reached the place from her memories. That told me how little of the way she actually remembered. I looked at the lake currently in front of our eyes. The lake we found with Takako didn't have a wooden pillar or a proper path leading to it. It was as wild as the forest around it. It also had a big tree leaning over the water. Takako had the bright idea to do her fishing from atop that very tree. Meanwhile, I had laid down a sheet on the sandy beach by the lake, just like this one, and ate a jam sandwich while observing her. It was a pleasant, silent place. We spent about 2 hours at that lake. I read a book I'd brought while Takako attempted to fish. Big fish would sometimes jump above the water, causing ripples to spread along the lake's surface. Though we didn't catch anything in the end, Takako was satisfied by the experience. I couldn't remember the way back all that well, but by the time we got back, it was already dark outside. Needless to say, my parents were furious. When we left the lake, Takako suggested we come back another day. I did give her a half-hearted reply of sorts, but I wasn't really planning on ever coming back. As such, that was the first and last time we went to that lake. I felt a bit sad, so I took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. That was but another little episode from my past. The chilly air filled my lungs, soothing my aching heart. Now that I thought about it, oh no, I'm gonna start crying. That might have been the farthest trip I had ever taken on a bicycle. And I'd forgotten all about it until now. I tried remembering my childhood. Fishing, hot springs, amusement parks, zoos, aquariums. Takako forced me to accompany her to a whole variety of places. As I remembered the lake from my past, it felt like it began overlapping with the one I was staring at now. Before I knew it, I couldn't tell which detail was supposed to belong to which scenery. I quickly snapped out of that state, realizing I'd been breathing heavily. It probably would have been wise to stay away from those memories until I calmed down, but they started swirling around me like a ship that had lost its rudder. I soon gave up on resisting and instead decided to take an objective look at them. First, I asked myself whether this lake was part of the real world. All lakes look the same anyway, I answered myself. That was probably more or less true. When you start to think about it too much, the resemblance becomes all the more striking. Or perhaps my memories were really being overwritten by the scenery. You've never been here before. In any case, this wasn't that lake, and I had no way of returning to the past. Oh, welcome back! I ran into Lily in the lobby. Hello. I hear you were out hiking. How far did you go? I followed the route on your map to Sakuradai. Oh, Sakuradai. The scenery is quite striking there, especially during good weather. It was nice, wasn't it? I could see beyond the gulf from the observation platform. I had lunch there, then circled around the mountain to come back. I see. Nana has only just returned too. I think she's preparing dinner right now. I see. Oh, that's right. I brought Kozue to the architectural office the other day. Everyone really liked her. At first, she was quiet as a mouse, but once we began talking about the mansion, she suddenly started asking more and more questions, until even the guys at the office started to run out of answers. In the end, they told us to come visit again anytime. I'm glad to hear that. Kozue said she was worried about bothering everyone with her curiosity. I see. I'm glad I'm the one who invited her. So there really was no need for her to worry. To think she's already considering these things at her age. My, what a nice girl. She might come off as a bit shy at first, but once you talk to her, you realize she can be surprisingly assertive, and she's cute as a button to boot. I wish Nana was more like her when she was a child. I imagine Nanae was quite active in her younger years. Indeed she was. At Kozue's age, she was still running around the mountains looking for insects. Yes, she didn't seem like the kind of girl who'd be afraid of bugs. I imagine Nanae chasing after insects and fishing in the mountains, which in turn made me remember Takako. Oh, will you look at the time, said Lilia as she glanced at the clock. To tell the truth, I still haven't finished some of my duties. We can discuss Nana's childhood some other time. Okay. See you later then. See you. After that, I climbed the stairs and returned to my room. I undressed, took a shower, and changed into something more comfortable. I glanced out the window while drying my hair at the dresser and saw the evening sun beginning to gradually shower the mountain range with its crimson rays. After lightly combing my hair, I descended to the lobby. The grandfather clock had just struck 5 o'clock. I considered going to the kitchen to look for Nanae, but then realized I would probably be getting in the way of her cooking, so I changed my mind. I shifted my eyes to the corner of the lobby, remembering the reading area Nanae and I designed together. Now that I look at it, I got worried whether a chair would really fit there. Curious about the overall design of the room, I sat down on one of the stools by the wall and began to slowly scrutinize my surroundings. I could hear the grandfather clock creak with each new swing of its pendulum. That old thing must have been a pain to maintain. A jug with a forest plant in it rested on the counter. A black phone slumbered all alone on a stool in the corner. I felt like Nanae had nothing to worry about concerning the lobby coming off as dull. By the time the orange rays of the sun penetrated the stained glass on the door, I started to regret not bringing a book with me. Being left with no other options, I spent some time observing the patches of sunlight as they slowly traveled from the center of the lobby to the camellia, then to the old register on the counter. I suddenly remembered how I met Nanae in Rome. She said she was looking for new furniture. Even this room alone had an expensive-looking shelf on the other end of the counter, an old decorative typewriter, and some seemingly antique stools, not to mention all the other things I'd already mentioned. I wondered how much of those Nanae collected by herself. At a closer look, I realized the items all seemed to date back to a wide variety of periods and came from all sorts of regions. However, they were now all part of the world Nanae created. A place filled with soothing, nostalgic atmosphere that reminded me of the Western fairy tales I used to read as a child. I figured I should ask her about what her buying standards were. A continuous ringing sound shook me awake from my daydream. It appeared to be the phone. It continued to ring as I gazed at it. It didn't seem like Lilia or anyone was coming back to pick it up. I stood and walked in front of the phone. I picked up the receiver. Hello? Hello. The voice from the other end Let me try this again. The voice from the other end of the line sounded kind of nostalgic. I instantly recognized it as Narasaki's. I'm sorry. I made you promise to call, but I ended up forgetting about it. Oh, don't worry about it. I'm sure if I'd have time to call anyway. Or I wasn't sure if I'd have time to call anyway. Did you manage to get back all right? Yep, she said. One of her usual snorts followed. Suddenly, I heard the gong of the grandfather clock. Is something wrong? Narasaki asked as the sound startled me. No, the clock just surprised me, that's all. Hearing me say that, Narasaki let out another chuckle. The clock continued to gong. I felt like I could hear it from the other end of the line, too. Did you like flowers, Sachiko? Flowers? Yep, flowers. Well, I suppose I do. Not much more than the average person, though. In that case, maybe you should try growing a garden as a hobby. Why, that sounds pretty random coming from you. Taking care of living things does wonders for relaxation. I'd recommend keeping a pet, but you're allergic to fur if I remember correctly. I just thought it'd fit you. Really? Well, I'll think about it. How's your schedule looking? When do you think I should drop by your clinic again? Narasaki didn't say anything, so I brought up the subject myself. However, she didn't answer right away, instead making a long pause. I don't think we'll be able to meet for a while. Why? I got a sudden new job. I'll have to travel a bit far for a while. What do you mean, far? Where are you going? And what's going to happen to your clinic? The location isn't clear yet. As for the clinic, I'll be closing it. That's sudden. Sorry, but... For a while, Narasaki said after I fell silent. She explained that we would not be meeting for a long while. I was even planning to buy her a present on my way back, but now I felt a little dejected by the sudden turn of events. Hey, these things happen, you know, Narasaki added as I absent-mindedly coiled the phone's cord around my finger. If... I started, but gave up. It's going to be lonely without you, I said instead. You can always call Nanae or Lily if you need company. I suppose so. Calling Nanae from time to time did sound like a pretty good idea, but I also felt like Narasaki's departure would leave a gaping hole in my life. If you still feel lonely, just blame it on the season. It's all too easy to get caught up in a melancholy mood when it's cold and silent outside. Your apartment has a balcony, right? Try growing primroses. They're strikingly colorful things that actually bloom in winter. I'll give that a try if I feel like it. Good. Well then, I'll be hanging up. There's still something I need to take care of. I see. What's wrong? Is there still something you want to tell me? I was already prepared to hear her say goodbye, but she didn't end the conversation just yet. What makes you think that? I pulled my finger away from the cord, letting it stretch back to its normal length. Whenever you left your grandparents' house's home in the country, you'd always keep waving at them from the rear window of the car until they were completely out of sight. That's the kind of child you were. I'm not a child anymore. You really think so? Narasaki said. I'm hanging up. Okay. See you. See you. I pulled the receiver away from my ear and placed it on the phone. I heaved a deep breath as I let go of it and stole a glance at the clock. Its minute arrow was pointing to the number 2. That wasn't a very long conversation. The pieces of the stained glass on the door glowed in navy blue. As I considered going back to my room to wait for dinner, I suddenly felt kind of tired and didn't want to climb the staircase. I sat down on the same stool as before and waited for my sudden exhaustion to pass. I glanced at the phone, but remembering Narasaki's last words, quickly looked away. Placing my elbows on my knees, I rested my forehead on my palms. I closed my eyes, listening to the pendulum swing back and forth. I opened my eyes to see the already familiar canopy above the bed. I promptly sat up and slid out from under the sheets as I always did. Then I got changed and headed off to have breakfast. As I reached the cafeteria, I found Nanae with my breakfast at the usual table. I greeted her and we began eating together. The meal consisted of bread rolls, scrambled eggs, spaghetti for breakfast, spinach salad for breakfast, sausages, and a handful of cherry tomatoes. This looks even more extravagant than usual. It's your last breakfast here, so I felt like putting in a bit of extra effort. You can leave some of it if it's too much. The rolled bread had soft ham and crispy cheese inside. Ooh. After finishing the bread, I scooped up a mouthful of spaghetti with my fork. This is pretty nostalgic. I remembered having something similar back in school, though it wasn't this good. Right? I liked them so much I ended up looking up the recipe. Those noodles look kind of unusual. Do they even sell those in a supermarket? They're called soft noodles. You can get them directly from the manufacturers if you order a large amount. I see. Apparently, they're specially made for school lunches. They don't get as mushy as the normal ones and are supposedly better for digestion. Yeah, I remember how easily they'd tear just from a gentle touch of your chopsticks. Exactly! Nanae nodded. I realized this after looking it up, but apparently, Japanese school lunches after the war mostly used bread imported from America. The noodle industry eventually caught wind of it and decided to increase the variety of food available in schools, developing these noodles as a result. They're especially rich in the B1 and B2 vitamins that children desperately needed back in those days. It all started in Tokyo before gradually spreading all across the country. I would have never guessed that these spaghetti had such a rich history. We spent the rest of our lunch discussing the kinds of food we used to eat at school. Apparently, Nanae was a big fan of mackerel miso soup. When I mentioned I liked to make sushi rolls, she taught me a few tricks to make the process easier and the results neater. I spent the afternoon in the mansion like I always did. But that is all the time that I have for this episode, guys, so if you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up down below. And if you haven't already, subscribe. By subscribing, you're becoming part of a legacy. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye!